They say nothing ever truly disappears online. But what about those posts that should have been deleted long ago? Welcome to LurmoStories. When the page loads, so does the terror. Don't close it. Not yet.
There's a hidden part of the park that most people don't know about. At first, I thought it was just an abandoned area, overgrown and forgotten. But that didn't stop me from going there. I'm not the type to shy away from a bit of mystery, and this park had always intrigued me. It's one of those places where the sun seems to set too quickly, and the shadows stretch longer than they should. Every evening, I'd walk the same path, letting the fresh air calm me, but this one night felt different. It had been a long day at work, and I was feeling restless. I decided to take a detour through the park, hoping the change of scenery would help. The usual spots, the lake, the playground, the old gazebo, were crowded, so I ventured farther, deeper into the overgrown parts where the footpaths were less maintained, and the trees grew thick and close together. There was a place I'd noticed before, tucked away behind the overgrown bushes and thick branches of an ancient oak. The grass was uneven, and there was no real path leading to it. But every time I passed, it always caught my attention. Tonight, something pulled me toward it more than usual. I brushed past a few low-hanging branches and found myself standing in a small clearing, surrounded by trees. At first, I thought I was just looking at another forgotten part of the park, but then I saw it. A small mound of dirt. At first glance, it didn't seem like anything significant, just an unkempt area where the earth had settled unevenly. But as I moved closer, I realized the mound was too perfect in its shape, too symmetrical to be natural. I knelt down, curious, and brushed away the loose dirt. Beneath the surface, I could make out the faint outline of something hard and cold. My heart rate picked up. At first, I thought it was a rock or some old piece of debris that had been buried over time. But as I cleared more dirt away, I started to see what it truly was. A wooden board, old and cracked, like a cheap coffin. A chill ran through me, but I wasn't about to back down. I dug deeper, my hands shaking slightly from the unsettling realization of what I was uncovering. The board lifted with a faint creak. Beneath it, there was something wrapped in cloth. It looked like a bundle, something too small to be anything but a body. I don't know what compelled me to keep going. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that I was already so deep into this discovery, there was no turning back. But I pulled at the cloth, and what I found sent a wave of nausea up my throat. A skeleton. It wasn't fully intact, but it was there. A human body, lying in the dirt, abandoned, untouched for who knows how long. I could make out the bones of a small frame, with the remnants of clothing clinging to what was left of the bones. There was something off about it, though. The body was old, yes, but it didn't seem ancient, just too recent to have been buried here for long. The clothes, the dirt, everything about it felt wrong. I couldn't bring myself to touch the bones anymore. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I looked around, half expecting someone to jump out from behind the trees, but there was nothing. No sound, just the wind rustling the leaves. My breath seemed too loud as I stood there, staring at the remains. I didn't know what to do. Who could I tell? Would anyone even believe me? The park had been there for decades, and I'd walked through it so many times, never noticing this hidden spot, never thinking anything strange could be lurking in the shadows. But now, as I stood there, the quiet seemed louder than usual. I backed away from the grave, not wanting to disturb it any further. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance. Movement. I froze for a moment, straining my eyes to see, but there was nothing there. No person, no animal, just the trees swaying in the wind. It was then that I noticed something else. The spot where I had found the grave, it wasn't on any map of the park. There was no path that led to it, and the trees around it were unnaturally dense. It wasn't just a forgotten area of the park. It felt like it was hidden on purpose, like someone didn't want anyone to know about it. I took one last look at the grave, and I swear, for a split second, I could have sworn I saw something, or someone, watching me from the trees. I couldn't explain it, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. Without another thought, I turned and made my way back to the main paths, my steps quick and heavy. But as I walked back through the park, the sense of being watched never left me. It lingered, following me like a shadow that refused to leave. Even after I left the park and locked my door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home. I kept thinking about the grave. Who had been buried there, and why was it so hidden? Why was it left unmarked? I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's when I started noticing the strange things. the dreams, the sounds at night, the feeling that something was waiting for me. The following days after finding the unmarked grave were unsettling. At first, I thought I was overreacting, just a moment of curiosity that spiraled into an irrational fear. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The nightmares started that same night. They weren't vivid or particularly frightening at first, just fleeting images, a blurry figure standing in the trees, barely visible through the branches. Then, I started to hear noises at night. It wasn't just the usual creaks and groans of an old apartment building. It was something else. A soft scratching, like nails against wood, coming from my closet. When I checked, there was nothing there. No rats, no sign of disturbance. But the noise persisted, every night, just as I was about to fall asleep. During the day, it wasn't any better. I found myself distracted, my mind drifting back to the park, to that spot. Every time I passed by the area where the grave was, I felt a cold weight in my chest. I began to avoid it, making sure I walked on the other side of the park, as far away from the trees as possible. But one evening, about a week after the discovery, I found myself drawn to it once again. I didn't want to go. My body screamed at me not to, but my feet carried me there anyway. The feeling of dread was overwhelming, and yet there I was, standing in the same place I had been a week ago. The trees still loomed like dark sentinels, casting long, twisted shadows across the ground. The spot where I had uncovered the grave was now covered again, as if it had never been disturbed. The dirt was fresh, too fresh. That's when I saw the first real sign that something was terribly wrong. The grave wasn't just an anomaly, it was part of something larger. As I moved closer to the spot, I noticed another disturbed area, a few feet away from the first one. This one was even less subtle. There were no traces of any kind of marker or headstone, but the earth had clearly been dug up. I hesitated for a moment, my mind screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't help myself. I reached for the dirt once more, scraping it away, my heart pounding in my chest. This time, when I pulled back the earth, I found something even worse than before. A second set of bones. But this wasn't just any body. This one was older, its bones brittle and yellowed, as though it had been buried for decades. The body was twisted, its arms contorted in unnatural positions. Its face was partially exposed, but the flesh had long since rotted away, leaving only a hollowed-out skull with a faint, eerie grin frozen in place. I recoiled, stumbling backward, my mind racing. Who were these people? Why were they buried here, in this hidden corner of the park, without any official record? It was all wrong, too wrong. My head spun, and I felt the cold fingers of panic creep up my spine. But then I heard it. A voice. It wasn't a whisper or the rustling of leaves. It was a clear, unmistakable voice, as though someone was standing just behind me. Leave. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. There was no one there. I was alone, yet the voice lingered, echoing in my mind like a ghostly warning. I couldn't stay any longer. My legs moved on their own, carrying me out of the clearing, away from the graves, and back to the main park paths. I didn't even look back, but as I walked, I felt the oppressive weight of being watched. It was like someone, or something, was following me, just out of sight. I barely made it home that night, my thoughts a jumble of confusion and fear. But the worst was still to come. That evening, as I sat in my apartment, I heard something new. A soft knock on my door. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I froze for a moment, unsure if I had heard it right. But then it came again, more insistent this time. I didn't know who could be at my door. I didn't know anyone in the building well enough to expect a visit. Tentatively, I stood and approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. When I opened it, there was no one there, nothing but the dim light from the hallway casting long shadows on the floor. I looked down, and there on the doormat was a small, weathered piece of cloth, the same fabric I had seen wrapped around the body in the grave. I didn't know what to think. My mind raced. Was it a sign? A message from whoever or whatever was tied to the grave in the park? That night, I locked all the windows, bolted the door, and turned on every light in my apartment. But I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the scratching again. Only now it wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from the walls. The next day, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to the park, determined to get some answers. But when I arrived, something had changed. The spot where the graves were, they were gone, completely. The ground was undisturbed, as if nothing had ever been there at all. I walked around in a daze, trying to make sense of what I had seen, but there was no trace of anything. No grave, no bones. Just the park, quiet and unremarkable as it had always been. But I knew what I had found, and I knew that, whatever it wasn't done with me yet. I didn't realize how deep I had gotten into this until it was already too late. I spent the next few days in a haze, questioning everything I had seen. I had no explanation for the graves that disappeared, for the cloth that appeared at my door. My nights were becoming unbearable, each one filled with strange noises that seemed to seep through the walls, the floors, the air itself. And yet, in the daylight, everything seemed ordinary. The park was still the same. The graves were gone. It was as though I had imagined it all, or worse, it had been erased from existence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. I didn't know what or why, but the eerie sense of being followed persisted. Each time I went outside, I felt eyes on me. Each time I turned a corner, I expected to see someone, something, standing just out of reach. But there was nothing, just the emptiness. Then, exactly 1 week after I had first discovered the grave, it happened again. I had been avoiding the park for days, but something inside me, the same nagging curiosity that had dragged me back the first time, pushed me toward it once more. I told myself I wasn't going to dig anything up this time. I was just going to look. Maybe there was a rational explanation. Maybe I was just seeing things. Maybe I was losing my mind.
But when I reached the old clearing, it was there. Not just the mound, but more graves, dozens of them, half buried and decaying in the earth, like the remains of forgotten souls. The air was thick with the scent of rot, and the ground seemed to pulse, alive with something I couldn't quite understand. I didn't know who had put these graves here, or why they had been hidden in the first place. But standing there, surrounded by them, I realized something. These weren't just random, forgotten bodies. They were carefully arranged, as though someone had planned it all, placed them there on purpose, like pieces on a chessboard. And the fact that I had found them meant I was a part of the game now. The voice came again, clearer this time. You shouldn't have come back. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was right behind me. I spun around, panic flooding my chest. There was no one, not a soul in sight. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure in the distance, just beyond the trees, standing still, staring at me. The figure was tall, its outline blurred by the thick shadows of the forest. It was too far to make out any details, but I felt it, this presence. The air around me turned cold, the hairs on the back of my neck standing straight. My heart raced, and my instincts screamed at me to run, to get out of there, but my body wouldn't move. The figure didn't move either. It just stood there, watching me.
And then, for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The grave that I had uncovered first, the one with the body wrapped in cloth, was still there, even though I could have sworn I had buried it. The earth had been disturbed again, but this time there was something on top of it, a stone, dark and weathered, with strange markings etched into its surface. As I stepped closer, I saw that it wasn't a simple stone at all. It was a name, but it wasn't a name I recognized. It wasn't even a name I could pronounce. The letters were twisted, foreign, like they were written in a language I couldn't understand, a language that made my skin crawl just by looking at it. Suddenly, the figure in the trees moved. It was fast, impossibly fast, and before I could even react, it was standing in front of me. It was tall, almost impossibly so, its face hidden in the shadows of its hood. I could see the faint outline of a mouth, twisted, as though it was smiling, but not in any way that felt human. "I warned you," it said, the voice low and raspy, like the sound of gravel scraping against metal. "Now you'll join them." My chest tightened and I stumbled backward, my mind racing for a way out. But my legs were frozen, unable to move. The figure took a step closer, and I realized with horrifying clarity that the ground around me had begun to shift. The earth beneath my feet was moving, as if it was coming alive, pulling me toward the graves. "No." "Please." I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat, swallowed by the terror that gripped me. The figure didn't respond. It just reached out with long, bony fingers, its hand closing around my arm. It felt cold, colder than the night air, and as it touched me, I felt a wave of darkness flood through me, a sensation like drowning, like being buried alive in the earth. I fought to pull away, but the grip was unyielding. My vision blurred as I was dragged toward the graves, the earth shifting and pulling at my legs like it was trying to swallow me whole. And that's when I understood. The graves weren't just for the dead. They were for the living, too. In that moment, I knew I wasn't going to make it out of the park. Not alive, at least. The figure's grip tightened, and the last thing I saw before the darkness closed in was the stone with the strange markings. The name carved into it, the one I couldn't read. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying in the dirt, in the very spot where the grave had been. The park was quiet, too quiet. The figure was gone. The graves were gone. Everything was gone, except for the cloth. It was right next to me, like it had always been there. And when I touched it, I felt the cold chill of death linger in my fingers. There's an old bus stop just a few blocks away from my apartment. It's nothing special, just a bench, a small roof, and a rusty sign that's almost faded beyond recognition. I've passed by it every day for years, but one thing always stood out: the old man. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was just there. Every morning when I'd walk to work, and every evening when I'd head back, he was sitting at the same bench, wearing the same thick gray coat, staring straight ahead, not moving a muscle. His face was almost unreadable, though his wrinkled skin seemed to have a permanent frown etched into it. No one ever sat next to him. I'm not sure why, but there was an unspoken rule in the neighborhood: don't disturb the old man. I guess we all thought he was harmless, just an eccentric figure lost in his routine, but something about him always felt off. It wasn't his appearance, though don't get me wrong, he looked like he'd been there forever. It was the sheer regularity of it, every single day. In rain, snow, or scorching heat, there he was. Never once did I see him leave. I tried to ask a few of my neighbors about him. Most people didn't seem to know much. They'd say things like, "Oh, he's always been there," or "He's been here longer than I've lived in this town." There was an air of indifference, like he was just another part of the landscape. But even with that, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong about it. The thing that started bothering me the most wasn't that he sat there every day. It was the way he always looked at the bus schedule. Not a glance or a casual look, but a prolonged stare, as if he was waiting for a bus that never came. I never saw him take a ride. I never saw him even acknowledge the cars that passed by, honking their horns as they sped along. It was like the bus stop was his world, and the rest of us were merely passing through. One evening, I decided to test something. I walked past him as I normally did, but instead of simply ignoring his presence, I stopped. For a few seconds, I just stood there, pretending to wait for the bus. He didn't react. No head turn, no shift in posture. It was like I wasn't even there. But then something strange happened. As I stood there, pretending to wait for the bus, I noticed something on the ground beside his bench. It was a small, crumpled piece of paper, just barely visible beneath his feet. At first, I thought it was trash, but as I looked closer, I realized it was a photograph. I bent down to pick it up, and that's when I felt it. The air around me seemed to grow colder. My heart started to pound in my chest. The photograph was of the old man, but the thing that made my stomach churn wasn't the fact that it was of him, it was the date. The photo had been taken 20 years ago. I didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it was a coincidence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the photograph was somehow important, that it was part of something bigger, something I wasn't seeing. I put the photo back on the ground, slowly backing away from the bench. As I did, I swear I felt the old man's eyes on me, though his face remained as expressionless as ever. I couldn't explain it, but I had the distinct feeling that he knew I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I passed the bus stop, my eyes were drawn to the old man. Was he waiting for someone? Or was he waiting for something else? It seemed like he was trapped in this strange loop, coming back to the same spot every single day after day. And that's when it hit me. What if he hadn't just been sitting there for 20 years? What if he'd been waiting for something all along? I asked myself over and over why I never saw him leave, why no one seemed to know anything about him, and why he looked so stuck. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was looking into the abyss. There was something deeply unsettling about the old man, something I couldn't quite explain. That evening, as I walked past the bus stop again, I made a decision. I had to know more. I had to find out what was really going on here. But before I could step closer, I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. The old man didn't even look up. His eyes were still locked on the schedule, unblinking. It was then that I realized, whatever it was he was waiting for, it was something that had been happening long before I came along. I couldn't get the image of that photo out of my head. The old man, 20 years ago, still sitting at the same bus stop. That photograph felt like a clue, something I was supposed to understand but couldn't quite grasp. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I started asking around the neighborhood more directly. People weren't as tight-lipped as I thought, but their answers were always the same. He's always been here. I don't know who he is, but he doesn't bother anyone. And, oddly enough, you just get used to him. There was one woman, Mrs. Greer, who seemed to know more than she let on. She was an older lady who lived in one of the houses near the park, and she'd seen the old man for as long as she could remember. She looked nervous when I asked her about him, glancing around as if checking to see if anyone was listening. "You won't find much about him," she said, her voice low. "Just leave it be. You'll never get any answers. Trust me." That made me even more determined. There had to be something more to this guy, something people weren't telling me. I kept pressing her, and after a long pause, she finally gave me something. The man, he was a war vet back in the day. He was in the Gulf War. I think his name's Thomas Gregory, but he's not the same man now.
Not since that night.
Mrs. Greer was quiet for a moment, as though debating whether to say more. She shook her head, as if dismissing her own thoughts.
I don't know why he sits there. He doesn't talk to anyone. People used to try to help him, but there's something wrong with him. People say he's been waiting for someone, but he doesn't remember who.
Who's he waiting for? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer.
I don't know. He never says, just sits there. But if you look close enough, there's something off about him. He's always looking at that bus schedule, like he expects something to come. But nothing ever does.
I asked her about the photograph, the one I found beside his bench. She didn't know anything about it, but the mention of the photo made her face pale.
Look, she said quickly, I'm not saying you should stop looking, but just be careful. Some things you just don't question. Her warning stuck with me as I left her house. I couldn't help but wonder, what had happened to Thomas Gregory? What had broken him? Why had he been sitting at that bus stop for 20 years, waiting for something, or someone, who would never come? I spent the next few days scouring local records. I looked up everything I could find on Thomas Gregory. There was no mention of any significant incidents in his life, nothing remarkable beyond his military service. But then, in the archives of the local paper, I found a small blurb. It was dated back 20 years, the same year he first appeared at the bus stop. The headline read, "Local veteran Thomas Gregory disappears after family tragedy." I was stunned. The article described a house fire, one that had killed his wife and child in a tragic accident. It mentioned that Gregory had been severely burned in the fire, and though he had survived, he never fully recovered from the loss. His grief was described as consuming, and the article mentioned that, after the fire, Gregory had withdrawn from the world, becoming a recluse. There was no mention of him being seen again after that incident, no details of him moving anywhere or doing anything that would suggest a life after his family's death. That was it. The article just stopped there. Something clicked in my mind. The old man at the bus stop, his unwavering routine, the years he had spent in that same spot. Could it be that he was waiting for his family? Could he somehow be trying to recapture that moment before everything fell apart? The idea didn't sit well with me. If he was waiting for someone, who was it? And why had he never left? Had time simply stopped for him, or was there something more to it? The next evening, I decided I needed to confront him. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I had to know. I walked to the bus stop, the evening sky just beginning to darken, and found the bench as empty as always. The old man wasn't there. I stood still for a moment, looking around, confused. Could it be that I had missed him? Or had he finally left? As I turned to leave, I heard a voice behind me. "You're wondering about the photo, aren't you?" I spun around, my heart racing. The old man was sitting at the bench, as though he had never moved. His eyes were fixed on me. His gaze was more intense than ever before. I took a hesitant step toward him. "Do you know who I'm waiting for?" he asked in a low, raspy voice. His words were barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to respond, but before I could say anything, he spoke again. "I'm waiting for them to come home. They'll come for me. I've been waiting for them for so long." I felt a chill run down my spine. The unease in his voice, the way his eyes seemed to stare through me, it was as if he was talking about something beyond this world, something he had waited for in a place that I couldn't see. Suddenly, he stood up, his movements stiff and deliberate. I took a step back, unsure of what was happening. "You don't understand," he murmured, his gaze still distant. "But they'll come. They always do." And with that, he turned, slowly, and walked away into the night.
I couldn't get the old man's words out of my head. They'll come, they always do. It was a strange thing to say. It felt like he wasn't just talking about waiting for someone. It was like he was waiting for something. And what made it worse was the feeling that he knew something I didn't. Something dark, something buried in time. The next day, I couldn't ignore the pull to go back to that bus stop. I felt like I was walking into the unknown, and yet, I couldn't stay away. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore, but something inside me was insistent. Something told me I had to find the answers. I arrived at the bus stop just as dusk began to fall. The air was thick, the usual sounds of the town muffled by an odd, unnatural silence. There was no sign of the old man, but something felt off. The bench where he had sat for so many years now felt like it was holding its breath. I couldn't explain it, but the emptiness felt oppressive, like the entire world was waiting for something to happen. I stood there for a while, just watching the fading light and the empty road. I began to feel a chill creeping up my spine, as though I wasn't truly alone. It was then that I noticed something. There, on the ground by the bench, was another photograph. It was a different one this time, though it had the same unsettling quality as the first. It was a picture of the old man, but this time he was standing, not sitting. His face was twisted in a look of raw anguish, his hands gripping the bus stop sign with white knuckles. But it wasn't the old man's expression that made my stomach turn. It was the other figure in the background of the photo. A figure that was barely visible, standing just beyond the bus stop, shrouded in darkness. The figure was too faint to make out any distinct features, but there was no mistaking the presence. I could feel its eyes on me, even though it wasn't fully there. I backed away, my heart pounding. The photo had been placed carefully, as if someone wanted me to find it. But who and why? I picked up the photo and looked around, half expecting to see the old man standing nearby, watching me from the shadows. But there was nothing, only the empty street and the fading light. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to leave the bus stop. It felt like the answers I was looking for were so close, but there was something in the air, something heavy, that warned me away from getting too close. The days that followed were filled with restless thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about that photo, about the man's words, and about the shadow that had loomed behind him. I began to question everything. Was the old man truly waiting for someone? Or was he stuck in some kind of endless loop, waiting for something that could never come? I returned to the bus stop a few times after that, but the old man never showed up again. It was like he had vanished. The bench was empty, and the bus stop had returned to its dull, lifeless state. The picture was the only thing that seemed to have any meaning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a warning, a message for me that I still didn't fully understand. One evening, about a week after I last saw him, I ran into Mrs. Greer again. She seemed different this time, her eyes darting nervously as she approached me.
Have you seen him?
She asked, her voice trembling. No, I replied, my throat tight. I haven't seen him since that night. She sighed, looking relieved but also frightened. I thought he might come back, but he never does. You were right to be curious, but sometimes it's better not to know the truth. I could tell she was holding something back, but I didn't press her for more. Instead, I asked, what happened to him? Why did he start sitting there every day? She hesitated, then looked me dead in the eye. He was waiting for his family to come back. You've seen the photo, haven't you? I nodded, my stomach sinking. The fire took them from him, his wife and child. But it wasn't just the fire that changed him. Something else happened that night, something none of us knew about. The old man's grief, it didn't just break him, it changed him. That's why he sits there, waiting for them to come back, even though they never will. I felt my blood run cold as she continued. There are things in this world, things we don't understand, that can take root in the deepest parts of our minds. Sometimes, they twist what's real and pull you into a place where time doesn't matter, where loss doesn't have an end. That's what happened to him. He wasn't just waiting for his family, he was waiting for a door that would never open. And now, she paused, her voice barely above a whisper.
Now, I don't think he can leave. Not ever.
Her words echoed in my mind long after she walked away. The old man wasn't just a grieving father. He was something else, something stuck in a place between this world and the next. And whatever it was that had taken root in his mind, it wasn't done yet. He wasn't waiting for a bus. He wasn't waiting for time to pass. He was waiting for something far darker, something that had been watching him from the shadows, just as it had watched me. And as much as I wanted to walk away from that bus stop, from that place that had swallowed him whole, I couldn't help but feel that it wasn't finished. The waiting wasn't over, Because in that moment, I realized something. I was the one who had been pulled into his story, and now I was the one left wondering what was real. I don't know when it started, but I can pinpoint the exact moment I noticed it. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where you don't expect anything out of the ordinary to happen. I was leaving the house after finishing my shift at the office and driving down the same old route I always take. Suburbia. Nothing exciting ever happens here, and I like it that way. But then, there it was. A dull gray car, unremarkable in every way, except for one detail. It was following me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People drive the same streets all the time. They're probably just heading in the same direction, right? I kept going, taking my usual turns, my hands tight on the wheel. The car stayed behind me, a little too close for comfort. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling of being watched crept in. I decided to test it. I took an unusual left turn onto a street I don't normally drive down, a small residential block. The car didn't turn with me, which I thought was odd. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But then, as I looped around the block, heading back to the main road, there it was. The same gray car, following at the same distance. The hair on my neck stood up. Was I just imagining things? I decided to make another move. I sped up, taking a sharp right at the next intersection. I glanced in my rearview mirror, still there. But now, it was so close that I could almost make out the driver, though I couldn't see much through the tinted windows. My heart started racing. I wasn't sure what to do next, so I tried something a little bolder. I slammed on my brakes, hoping they'd be caught off guard and keep driving. But no, they slammed their brakes just as quickly, maintaining the same distance. That's when the unease settled in, a creeping anxiety I couldn't shake. I hadn't done anything to provoke this person, yet here they were, following me like a shadow. I didn't recognize the car, the make or model, and there was no license plate. Just a dull gray shell, as featureless as a ghost. I made my way back home, hoping that the car would disappear into the night. It didn't. I pulled into my driveway, and sure enough, it slowed down as it passed. The car's headlights turned off as it neared, but I didn't see it turn anywhere. It just stopped in front of my house, the engine idling in the dark, and stayed there. The feeling of dread crawled up my spine. I couldn't move, couldn't even bring myself to look away. I wanted to call someone, but I didn't even know what I would say. After a long minute, the car drove away. No sudden movements, no honking, just a slow, deliberate retreat into the night. I stayed inside that night, staring out my window, waiting for the headlights to come back, but nothing happened. I convinced myself it was a fluke, that I had overreacted. That is, until the next time it happened. I didn't expect to see it again, but there it was, lurking in the corner of my eye as I prepared to leave the house the next evening.
The same dull gray car. I paused at my front door, staring at the street in disbelief. My heart sank as the feeling of being watched returned in full force. This time, I wasn't just paranoid. I had seen it before, and I knew what it meant. I tried to ignore it. Maybe I was just imagining things. But then, as I pulled out of my driveway and onto the road, it followed. Just like the night before. That same eerie proximity. I told myself I wouldn't let it get to me this time. I drove on, sticking to my usual route. But deep down, I couldn't shake the thought that I was being hunted, that this wasn't some coincidence anymore. I tried a few tricks to lose it. I turned sharply down another road, one that branched off the main path and led to an industrial area. I drove fast, trying to create some distance. I watched the rearview mirror with growing dread. The gray car was still there, tailing me with unnerving precision, matching every turn I made. The distance between us remained the same. I wasn't alone on the road, but in that moment, I felt completely isolated. I even went off-road, veering onto a nearby parking lot that led into an empty strip mall. The gray car followed, gliding behind me with a calmness that unsettled me. There was no rush in its movements, just a slow, calculated pursuit. I slammed the brakes again, hoping it would drive past me, but it didn't. The car came to a stop a few feet behind me, its headlights now dimmed. I sat in the car, not knowing what to do. The street was empty, no one around to help. I wasn't sure what I was even afraid of. The car had never done anything aggressive, just followed me, quietly. But something about it made my skin crawl. A few minutes passed. I stared at the rearview mirror, the gray car still behind me. I wanted to scream, to get out and run, but I was frozen in place, as if some invisible force was holding me back. Then, as if on cue, the car slowly turned its headlights back on and drove away, disappearing into the night as if it had never been there. I didn't want to go home after that, but I had nowhere else to go.
I drove aimlessly for a while, circling the streets. When I finally turned into my driveway, I half expected to see the car waiting there, but there was nothing. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the car, about how it followed me without fail. It wasn't just a random occurrence, there was something deliberate about it. I couldn't explain it, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't over. The third night was different. I woke up in the middle of the night, the familiar weight of unease settling over me. I hadn't even meant to look out the window, but there I was, standing in the dark, staring at the street. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The gray car wasn't a coincidence.
It was a pattern, and I knew that if I didn't confront it, I'd never be able to live with the constant dread of it haunting me.
I decided to drive. There was no plan, no destination, just me trying to figure out what this car wanted. I got in the car and started the engine. The streets were quiet, empty, as if the town had decided to hold its breath for me. I didn't think the car would follow tonight. Maybe it had been a series of random events, and maybe, just maybe, I was overthinking it. But of course, there it was, that gray car. It appeared behind me, like it had been waiting for me to make my move. My pulse quickened, but this time, I wasn't going to run. I kept driving, focusing on the road ahead. I wasn't going to be scared this time. I would find out what this was all about. I took a different route tonight, one I hadn't used before. I needed to see if it would follow me regardless of where I went. The car didn't disappoint. It stayed right behind me, like a shadow that refused to leave. This time, I turned into a deserted industrial area. The kind of place you wouldn't normally find yourself in at night. Empty warehouses and poorly lit streets. I parked the car, shut off the engine, and sat in the silence, waiting for it to make the next move. The gray car slowly pulled up beside me, the headlights cutting through the darkness. For the first time, I saw the person behind the wheel, just barely.
A figure, seated in the driver's seat, their face obscured by the darkness of the car's interior. But there was something about the way they sat there. No hurry, no aggression. They didn't move. They didn't blink. I watched, my heart hammering in my chest. I had no idea what to do. The gray car sat there, as still as I was. I must have been sitting there for an hour, maybe longer. The silence was unbearable. The air around me felt thick, heavy, with something I couldn't name. I was about to turn the ignition and leave when the figure in the car made a sudden movement. They reached for the window handle and rolled it down, just a crack. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. A low, almost inaudible voice came from the car. "You've been taking the same route every night," it said, the words hanging in the air like a curse. "Don't you get tired of it?" I couldn't respond. My breath caught in my throat. The voice, somehow familiar, made my skin crawl. My mind raced, but I couldn't place it. How did they know I'd been driving the same routes? How did they know I'd been avoiding certain streets? Then, without another word, the car slowly backed up, its headlights dimming. I watched as it turned and drove off into the night, leaving me alone in the stillness. I didn't wait. I jumped into my car and sped home, not daring to look back. When I pulled into my driveway, the street was silent. The gray car was gone.
The haunting feeling of being followed, of being watched, faded a little, but not entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just being followed. I was being studied. The next morning, when I checked my phone, I saw the message. It was a text from an unknown number. It read, "You can't run from what you've already started." That's the last time I saw the gray car, but I still don't feel safe. I don't drive the same routes anymore. And every time I step outside, I wonder, what happens when it finds me again?
The stories you've heard tonight aren't the last. There are always more threads to unravel, more posts to discover. Stay with LurmoStories because the terror never truly ends.